Okay, we have before us an agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Ann and a second by Nancy. All in favor? Unanimous. First on our agenda is presentation and discussion items, and we have the IE squared contract public hearing with Carl Mercer and Beth Kiefer, or just Carl? Or okay. How are you?
Great. How are you doing?
Good.
So glad that we could have this hearing today. We wanted to get together to talk about the IE Squared Partnership Contract and our amendment number 4, which is actually a proposal to extend the current IE Squared contract flexibilities by 1 year. This is the 5th and final year of the IE Squared contract. So the flexibility provisions that are given to us are set to expire on June 30th, 2014. State Board of Education allows, the State Board rule allows the State Board of Education to extend the contract if the local education agency successfully meets the terms of the contract for at least 3 or more years. So we have the opportunity to extend our IE Squared contract for another 5 years, but in order to do that, they have to evaluate the current contract. The performance data for our current contract will not be available until November 2014 or thereabouts. So in order to evaluate where we're at, we have to have that performance data. And in fact, we don't have performance data from the final evaluation from GOSA on our 4th year contract yet. So if granted by state, the current IE Squared contract will be extended for 1 year to June 30th, 2015. So this proposed extension will allow time for this evaluation to be completed of the 5th year. The extension will allow for Forsyth County Schools extra time to also negotiate a more long-term IE Squared contract extension. During this time, because of the changing nature of assessment these days, there will be no performance targets on this extension. It's only a 1 year extension, so there were no pieces to it. It's either all meet 1 year or don't meet. So the decision was made that we would not have any new performance targets required on this extension. So Georgia, as I said, because Georgia is transitioning to the new assessments for the 2014-15 school year. Timeline of our meetings with GOSA and DOE. So February 26, 2014, we met, we talked about our options of a 1 year extension so that we could have time to evaluate the IE Squared contract. March 2014 to April 2014, we had ongoing meetings and communication about the proposed contract extension. April 10th, the finalized IE Squared contract extension proposal on amendment number 4 was submitted to FCS from the Governor's Office of Student Achievement and the Georgia Department of Education. April 17th, we are holding our public hearing conducted concerning the Amendment 4, which is a requirement before it is heard by the State Board. And on May 8th, Amendment 4 will be presented to the State Board of Education. And that's our contract extension for 1 year.
So we're not changing any of the parameters or whatever we established to begin with. That remains the same.
Yeah, all of our flexibilities will remain the same.
Okay.
And the performance targets, there will be no performance targets for the 1 year because with the assessments changing,
Right.
We would not know. We don't have data to create a baseline, so it'd be stepping into the unknown as far as what we'd be held accountable for.
So after the evaluation on the prior year that will come about, were there not a couple of schools that there might be some problems with? Is meeting their targets or not? Do we know yet?
There are some schools that we're working with. We've negotiated a couple extra items in as far as the evaluation piece with GOSA, second look indicator. So there's some things that will help us with that. So currently, we haven't done the full evaluation yet, and we like I said, we don't have the fourth-year evaluation yet.
Right.
So once we get that, we'll continue to work with those schools.
Because part of the problem is we didn't have the finances to make those things happen. So
Right.
that really wasn't due to
So you
not
don't have the
performing.
fourth or fifth year?
That's correct. Yeah,
Evaluations.
the
Right.
fourth. We've got data from the fourth year, but normally the state's data is a little bit different than ours, so we submit it and we talk, and it's not finalized yet.
Okay.
Right.
So when you say extra time to negotiate a long-term contract, do you mean another 5 years?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. That, it will allow us time to look at the data, gather it, create a baseline, and determine with the new assessments what those baselines are fair to hold our schools
Even then, would
accountable.
only be 1 year. It'd still be kind of tricky to get it just right, don't you think?
Well, we've already actually started talking about possibilities for another 5-year, maybe what those parameters would be. So
When-
originally, I did request that maybe we look at a 2-year, but they feel confident that they'll have the score, the evaluation in, and will be able to have time to negotiate a new contract.
So how does that fit in with, we have to make the decision to stay on the IE squared contract for 5 more years. By next year, everybody has to make a decision to do that, or charter system, or status quo. So do you think we're in danger of losing the possibility of the IE square?
No, I really don't think so. I think I square will
Okay.
continue to be an option. I think
Okay.
the real key for us is how we were able to negotiate what accountabilities that we had, and I think that's really wide open. But I think it's gonna be really critical for us to know what those measurements are going to be, whether it's tied to the CCRPI, which is still a work in progress, and we'll continue to talk about that. What the new state assessment is gonna look like, and I certainly think it needs to be tied to something broader than the new state assessment, because, well, one, we don't know what that looks like yet. And we don't, whereas IE squared, we knew how our students performed on the CRCT.
Right.
We knew that large percentages of them met, but we wanted to move more students from meeting expectations to the exceeding expectations. Carl or Beth may know what this is gonna look like, but I don't know what it's gonna look like yet. So I think all of us are waiting, and we won't know until that test has been administered, frankly, not just once,
That
but
was,
probably
right.
multiple times.
that's the point I was trying to make after
Along
one.
the
Yeah.
way. So, I think that it's very likely that you will see this 1-year extension. Carl recommended a 2, which was a good recommendation. I would, a year from now, I wouldn't be surprised if you're not here looking again
Another
at
extension.
another
Yeah, I can't
year's
see how-
extension.
Because we don't have the data.
Just because
Right.
you gotta know what those accountability measures are gonna look like.
Right.
Where you're
have
starting
to
from,
change
that
it.
baseline.
One
So
year
when are
into
you
the
supposed to
contract.
have everything done? When is this year extension up, I guess is what I'm saying?
This year, this current,
The extension that we're talking about, when would it be, when we have to have everything done? If you just had this one extension?
June 30th,
June 30th,
2015.
15.
Yes, ma'am. So, and that is a concern. We do
Yeah.
want, we want a true baseline, and
Yeah.
Right.
so.
A
we can
fair
see-
baseline too.
Right.
Right.
It's
Fair
kind of hard to
one.
believe
Right.
everything will be all ready to go and we'll be really, we're going to do our best, but it just seems like 2 years from now, we're still going to be trying to work it out.
Right.
And that's a good possibility.
So
But
start with
still
one,
be a better
right?
Start with
choice.
one.
See what
Yeah.
happens.
Hey,
Be a
try
better
to push
choice
it
for us, I
more,
think.
yes.
It's
Now,
the
this
only
is
choice.
public
The only
hearing. Are
choice
we
for
having a
us,
public
right,
hearing
right.
today?
This is the public hearing.
Oh, it's
Yes, sir.
public presentation. Public hearing
It's
usually.
technically a public hearing if anybody wants to add comment.
Okay, so
Okay.
we need to make that clear.
Okay,
Okay.
all right. Is there anybody that would like to add comments, speak? No? Okay. All righty,
We
any other
could beg someone
questions?
to comment. Pay maybe.
Well, I think we.
Yeah, we could have a new guy on the block, right?
Good luck with that.
Talk about
You
IE
know,
squared.
Winning what he thinks about I squared.
Right.
He'll be like, Is there any other questions or anything? Mm-mm. We're good?
Well, can I ask Carl a question or two?
Yes, you
Sure.
may.
Carl, based on the experience of observing and working with our schools, how would you articulate their comfort level in terms of what our current performance measures are in meeting them? And what frustrations have we experienced? And as we look ahead and knowing, okay, while we get this year extension, what are some things that we would want to work out during this year's period of time?
Well, one of the areas of frustration is that we're very high-performing school district. So as we set the performance targets before, the way that they were set, we had to either maintain where we were at with our baseline, or we had to cover the gap if there was a gap. Well, several of our schools, maintaining where they're at is very high-performing. And so we had some schools that may have not met in certain subgroups based on a target of 98% or 99%, and they get 96%, and yet they're deemed as not meeting in that subgroup. So as I work through some possibilities, and I'm always thinking about what would be the best fit for Forsyth County, as I work through those possibilities, I look at something that's more fair.
More of a range.
That's why I said fair.
And maybe
Right.
it's not that they have to, if we're above and beyond, maybe it's not we maintain, but maybe we have to keep half of that gap.
Right.
Stay above half of that. So you take half of the gap, and that's what your performance target becomes. So as far as frustration, meeting up, having achievement that is above 90%, yet because of where your target was, you're deemed as not meeting. So that's something we want to look at. We also want to look at and continually massage the second indicator, which is based on our CCRPI score, because since it is not finalized and it looks different than it did last year, we want to make sure that we keep that in check as well, and continue our communication with that with GOSA. That's a piece that GOSA is in charge of, and so that doesn't call for a contract change or mandate, since it's just the evaluation. So we can talk, and we're having continuous conversations about different pieces that we can look at. So, and some of the other things with CCRPI, focusing on every student, especially with growth percentiles, they look at every single student, so every single student has an opportunity to show growth and to gain points for the student, is to look at that overall. Instead of focusing on subgroups, look at the all group, but also incorporate that growth in some way, so that we're also incorporating every single student. And because we know that subgroup is 15 or more for CCRPI, which is different than it was for AYP. So being able to incorporate every student instead of just focusing on certain groups.
It's almost, the detail is just, for a district like ours, is almost, it's, what you're saying is it's just not worth it, because we're just so tight, and so there's such a little area. My concern is that the IE square contracts are treated as fairly as the charter systems,
Oh, that's good.
which are not having to do what we have to do as far as accountability goes. Where we have every little subgroup, every little thing meets to, to exceeds and all that stuff. They're not having to deal with that kind of accountability. So at some point, the state's got to recognize that if we're high achieving, that we should be at least treated on the same level as charter systems that may not be as high achieving as we are.
Yeah, they're receiving the same flexibilities,
Exactly.
yet they're not held accountable to the
No.
same high standards that we are.
No, they're not.
I agree. Yes, ma'am.
That's not right. So,
I'm done.
You want, that's all you needed to ask?
I just want to see how Carl would do with the question.
you did great.
Good.
Did very well.
Anybody else?
Hands are sweating, but I appreciate it.
I was gonna go on to Ms. Keithler, but I decided that since it's testing week and stuff like that, I'll.
Yeah.
Give her a break.
Yeah.
Do you see
high
what he's
pressure.
doing? Just because he's leaving, he's picking on everybody? You've got to be careful when you come up here.
Well, I enjoy working with I squared and CCRPI and working with the numbers. So if you ever have any questions, feel free to get in contact with me, and I'd be happy to sit down with you and go through the details with you.
As long as you give me the bottom line, I'm fine.
I like the details.
I
So
know.
does Nancy.
I'm a bottom line kind of girl. Okay,
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
very much.
thank you.
Makes the world go round.
Okay, next we
Second.
have executive session to discuss personnel. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Nancy and a second by Tom. All in favor? Unanimous.